Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Edward. I will be your host. And for all those who are joining for us for the first time, I thought we could begin with an introduction to WalkingTree. So we can just have that slide up. Yep. Basically, we're a technology company, and our core focus is designing and building cross-platform web and mobile applications. We also perform system integrations, and we enable our clients to achieve seamless digital transformation. Our specializations basically include data integration, analytics. We help our clients migrate from legacy to modern systems if that's the need. We also help with cloud migrations. AWS is something we're really focusing on right now. And of course, UX design. We also provide our customers with microservices, DevOps, and cloud solutions. We have a staff augmentation service, basically a service we provide to our clients where we empower their staff with on-demand skills and resources. And this helps them to meet their business objectives. And lastly, we help implement solutions like objective performance assessment. We're also key partners for implementing Digit. It's an open source platform for urban governance. That's about WalkingTree Technologies. Now, I'd like to tell you something about the person who's going to be conducting the webinar. His name is Hiren Gogoi. He is our user experience lead at WalkingTree. He has a total of 10 years of experience, and over that period of time, he has developed his experience for and appreciation for design thinking and storytelling. Basically, simplifying that process with the right frameworks and tools has ever since been a delight for him. So that's something a little about Hiren. And now I'd like Hiren to take over from here. And I hope you guys enjoy this session. Hiren, over to you.
Hey, Edward, thank you for the nice intro. I hope I'm audible across all of you. If you can just confirm quickly. Edward, can you please confirm? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Kiran.
All right, great. Thank you, Edward. So today I'll be talking about, I think already you know about the topic that we have in place, that is accessibility, designing for all. Before I begin there, I think Edward has already mentioned, but here is what I have to tell about myself in 2 lines. That my name is Rain, and I basically do experiments to make better experiences. So having said that, let me just get to the point without further delay. This is what I would like to begin with. Basically, when UX doesn't consider all users, shouldn't it be known as some user experience or such? That's said by Bill Gregory, senior accessibility engineer. And I quite resonate with this quote because often we talk about UX, but did we really consider the fact, is it UX for all, or is it UX for only a particular group of people? Like, are we leaving out some people in that case? So I think this particular quote or this particular line, clearly indicates that, the term that sucks. I think he meant to say it in a very, satirical meaning, but I think that gives the sense of it, like, what he's trying to say. So agenda today, for the session today is fairly very simple. As you can see, some questions here: what is accessibility? Why designing for all matters? Some of the accessibility principles that we'll be talking in regard to web and mobile design, and accessibility for usability, good versus poor accessibility. We'll try to see some examples as well, and WCAG guidelines. This is in no particular order that we'll be just talking about. We'll slightly touch base upon each of the topic in the discussion that is going to continue to follow. Okay. So coming back, the first question that comes into our mind, when it comes to accessibility is, what does it actually mean? What is accessibility is about? So this is nothing, it's very simple, and it means basically having to have a design that is built for all. That means we are giving access to all for our designs, regardless of the technological or the physical means. It's also about building an empathy, because when you're talking about user experience, right, it's all about empathizing with the user and having that inclusive mindset. Whenever the design professional is designing something, we have to also always keep those people who are some way they are like physically they're like people with some amount of disability. So those are the things basically we have to basically take into consideration. So that is what I meant by the inclusive design mentality. And the Tim Berners-Lee, who is like the director for W3C and the inventor of the web, he has rightly said it, the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone regardless of disability is an essential aspect, and that is what we are trying to achieve through accessibility in user experience. So what I mean actually when I say designing for all, or particularly in regard to the accessibility tops here. So when it comes to accessibility, we are particularly talking about people with disabilities, and disabilities can be a visual disability, auditory disabilities, motor disabilities, and cognitive disabilities. So these are the primarily four set of categories, that any people with disability can come under. And when we are designing something, when you are creating something as a product for the user, we have to make sure that we also think about these people in mind. That is what the inclusive design mindset is about. So that is what we'll be going or slightly touch base upon all these points for the next couple of minutes. Accessibility again is a very huge topic. So today what we're going to cover is a very high level, maybe 35,000 view feet of what accessibility means. So why designing for all matters? Primarily, there are three motivations: a legal aspect to it, a moral aspect to it, and a business side aspect to it. So I will walk you through each of them one by one. So why this can be a very serious concern, and why how you can end up in trouble if you don't take this into consideration. So those are the things actually we are going to discuss for the next few minutes. So coming to the legal side, if you look at it, 1 in 5 people in US and 1 in 7 people in the European Union are actually facing or having some amount of disabilities. Okay, so why having accessibility in place matters? Because it is about protecting the human right internationally. I mean, you are designing something in the interest of all the people. I mean, you cannot leave out that 1 in 5 people or 1 in 7 people out of those. Okay, so it's some people see more like a fundamental right as a part of their UX fabric, which can be a good design practice here. And in some places it is actually required by federal laws. There are geography wise there are different federal laws, but we'll try to cover some of those maybe in a couple of next slides. And there are cases actually where accessibility has got people or companies in trouble. I mean, there are fairly some good example like American Online or Charles Schwab, and Netflix also getting into trouble along with CNN. So these are like a couple of examples. They are like widely popular. They're like very easily accessible stories over the internet. You can quite quickly search for it and get to the tagline of it. So on an average, there are like 250 lawsuits that has actually happened between 2015 and 2017. That's what the stat says. So basically, you can see how serious it can be. Like if you don't follow certain standards, in terms of making it useful or accessible to all the users, because you cannot leave out that one particular person, out of the 5 or out of the 7 here. So that is how people are actually perceiving it as a fundamental right. Going forward, like these are like couple of acts that they're like across like different geographies. Particularly when in this particular slide I'm trying to cover from US and the European Union perspective. So American Disability Act, which is like that was established in the year 1990, that serves like a primary the fundamental first piece of document for getting accessibility into a standard format here. Then there came up a Telecom Act of 1996 and Section 508, which is like now very famous, when it comes to accessibility. And it is widely referred and widely followed by user experience designers across the globe. And then on the European side, if you look at it, you have the European Disability Strategy Act and the Digital Agenda for Europe. So all these are in place. And most generally, which is like commonly available, you have the W3C guidelines and WCAG 2.0, 2.1, that those guidelines are there. Particularly people in the context of India, in general, follow those guidelines when they are designing this from accessibility point of view. Again, going to the Nordic countries, they are taking it more seriously than any other. Like, they have two separate acts, like the Discrimination Act that came into effect in 2013, and the EU directive that came into practice from late 2018. So they, with these two acts, actually, they are taking it more seriously, bringing it like a fundamental right to each of the citizens there. So if at all you are doing something, or you are making a website out of Sweden or Norway, you have to be specifically careful, when you are doing it. And then you have the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So these are the, like, some standard acts or bodies out there who is looking into how well you are covering the people with disabilities. Are you including them in your design or in your product or not? Coming to the second aspect, that is the moral aspect of it. Uh, Statistically, what it has been found that, the people with disability face a discrimination access to employment. It's fairly unfair. I mean, in the sense that, people with disability, take for example a person coming for an interview, and he or she needs to go to a place which is like, 7 stories above, and but there is no lift. So that is certainly a discrimination, right? So we cannot be very unfair about those set of people there. I mean, they have to be included. So in some cases, actually, it is noticed that, that people with some amount of physical disability have the limited access in such cases. So we need to make sure that, they are included, because as a user experience person, or you as a empathetic company, you have to include them for sure. And then there comes the universal access and interoperability, basically, that talks about the responsive web design, some of which we are going to cover in detail in the next few minutes. Then there are the business motivation. As I said, in the legal aspect, when I was talking about it, that can get you into serious trouble. So business motivation could be, how do I avoid a lawsuit? Or it could be like, accessibility, as I said in the second point, that it can encourage this the clean coding practice. It's more of a technical practice, that we need to include in our design, so that, we cover all the user in one place. It helps basically enhancing your usability. That means you are indirectly or directly enhancing the reach. That means you are enhancing your SEO presence there. It supports the internationalization. It supports mobile friendly content. And you have the WAI area, that is Web Accessibility Initiative. There is an initiative taken by this forum that is they're coming up with a framework called the Accessibility Rich Internet Application. So with this standard set of practices, they are trying to bring everything under one place, so that all the users are included. So this could be like, three different areas broadly, as we have seen here: the legal, moral, and the business aspect of it could be the motivation for why we should consider designing for all. Going to the next, I'll be talking a bit about how part of it. Already we have discussed the why part of it, like, why accessibility could be a serious concern and why we should make it, happen for all the user. Now coming back to the how part of it, how we can make accessibility available to all the users, or how you can basically inculcate in practice. I'll be just speaking about that a little bit. So there are a couple of principles, that we can actually inculcate. First, when we talk about accessibility, if we are able to cover the visual disabilities, people with visual disabilities, that means we are like 80% covered. So how we can basically be there? It could be, it could be having some design practices that is included in the braille keyboard or some sort of screen reader. Some people may be needing some sort of assistive technology to read that. So how can we basically think about including those software or tools that can help them get there. Screen readers basically that they always helps reading the text in different pitch and speeds. So those things basically we have to think about it. And some people with sight impairments, they want to have a screen magnifier. If we can, these are like simple tools and tips that if we include in our design and practices, like a simple tool like screen magnifier that allows you to zoom in and zoom out, can certainly improves the experience for a visually poor person there. Coming to the next slide, when I talk about again vision, there can be a four category of people that comes under vision problems. There can be the person with low vision, that is but like a permanently reduced vision but with some amount of sight. The reason could be many. I mean, it could be a medical condition, as you can see in the slide. It could be due to some accidents. This cannot be basically permanently corrected, but they have some amount of sight that they can look into. So we have to consider those people for sure. Then you have the total blindness. There we don't have the these people, this set of category people, they don't have the light perception. So we call it as no NLP, or the no light perception. That can be a result of trauma or injury or condition like end stage glaucoma. So how they basically get into that stage. Then you have the congenital blindness, people basically who are blind from birth. Then you have another term. It's more of a classification than of a functional description. That is, but you have you have to consider like the 20 by 20, 20 by 200 rule there. I mean, how they are defining it is like if a person can see something at the 20-foot distance, and if there is a person who can see the same object from a 200-foot distance, that means the person in the first case is legally blind. So that is how they are classifying it. This is just a classification for legal purpose. So these four set of when I'm talking about the visual impairment, we have to consider this four set of people, four category of people, that we should be including in our practices. Going next, again, the first thing that I would like to touch base upon is, because I talked about the visual part of it, that is the contrast part of it. Now I'm coming into the how part. So WCAG, that is the World Consortium for Accessibility Guidelines. They have basically set up few standards, the web content accessibility guidelines. Sorry. So they have like few levels like A, AA, AAA. So A is like at the lowest level, that is like more or less acceptable, but AA is where it is coming to be like the widely acceptable category, and that is where most of the audiences are covered. So if you look at my image here, a WCAG level of AA, basically that covers a 3:1 contrast ratio. It's like an ideal practice. That's what they have set it. So the text on my right hand side of the image here, as you can see, they are like more legible. So that is a ratio that they are setting up to make it a standard practice. If I go that, this one is my favorite actually. If you have been a UI designer who have been basically coding or actually making things happen on HTML, so all text are actually, we have been writing it, but we may not have seen the immediate result, or why do we basically use it. So this is where it comes into picture to help you out. So why all text are important? Because as you can see on my image here, you have a Doritos nachos cheese pack here, and how it has come on the HTML side. On the coding side, you can see Doritos tortilla chips nacho cheese, 1.75 ounce large single serve bags, pack of 64. So what it's going to do is basically, when you have a all text here, let's say a person with a visual disability comes and visit this page, but he cannot basically see in that case due to his particular health condition, right? So alt text in this case, if it is there and present, is definitely going to help the screen reader option to read it. The alt text, whatever you are seeing it here, right? So if the visually impaired person can basically listen to the tracks that is mentioned here. So if I come here, let's say, and if I have some visual impairment issue, so in that case, I can basically simply tune into my or switch into my screen reader, and the screen reader is going to read the text that is covered under alt text here. So that's why it's very, very important that we cover it in our design practice. Now about how to write a better alt text. As you can see on my image here, you have the one person basically getting down from a escalator. So they're like how to basically write a good alt text in this case. So as you can see, okay alt text can be like man on escalator. A little better than that would be a man walking on the escalator. But best of all the alt text could be a man wearing a backpack walking down the escalator. So why it is the best case scenario? Because it has been able to cover as much details as possible. So if you consider the previous cases where it says okay or better, it is somehow giving me a very generic idea. But when it comes to the best case here, if you look at the picture here, a person with a black bag, and he's just walking down the escalator, that covers the entire scenario here. So when you are writing the alt text in this case, we should be as descriptive as possible, thinking the other end user who could be visually impaired, from for whom the alt text could be useful. So we have to make sure that whatever alt text we are writing, it is as descriptive as possible and useful for the user. uh, my second point of interest would be to talk about the hamburger menus. Often we have seen it, like when it comes to responsive design, you have these menus, a navigation bar at the top. But when you shift the same when you browse the same page to a mobile device or an ipad, that navigation menu is not there, and what you see is like a hamburger menu. So basically hamburger menu, it looks like a three dashes, as you can see on my screen. So like how to make the hamburger menu more useful here. In most of the cases, what we have seen when we are doing the accessibility analysis, that the properly a tag is not used in that case. So as you can see on my screen here, we have two different set of example. One is the red line of code, that will also give you a hamburger menu, and the other being on the green, that will also give a hamburger menu. But the case with the red part of the code, it doesn't cover the state of or the level of what is covered in the green part of it. As you can see on my green part here, you see a area level, that is nothing but, as I have already told you before, that you have this. Let me just get back to my first slide, where I have mentioned about area, that web accessibility initiative or accessibility rich internet application. So this is following that same guideline to basically put into practice. So adding an area level here. So when you're basically collapsing to, or let's say getting into a lower resolution or screen size, in that case, basically it will basically tell you with this tag that hey, the menu is open when it is shown there, or when it is hidden, it will not be available there in that case. So it is very important that we properly tag the hamburger menus according to the state. WAI area guidelines, I have already mentioned about it a couple of times. So it basically says, the widget should be represented as with the standard naming nomenclature. The menu tree item, if it is a menu, we should represent it as a menu. If it is a tree item, we should represent it as a tree item, and so on. The slider or progress bar. The structure of the headings region should be properly defined, and the state of the widgets, if it is checked or not, if it is has pop-up or not pop-up, those things could be basically properly defined to adhere to the WAI area guidelines. HTML markup, there is a reason why these tags exist. All these elements, as you can see, the header, nav, main, article, footer. This is an extent. This can be taken as extension to whatever the area guidelines. whatever the title of the page or the heading that is coming, right, that should come under header 1, header 2, like that, which should be properly, the content hierarchy should be set like that, according to the visual presence that you are required for the page. Again, coming to the video content, we have to think about it for sure. Some people, let's take for example with auditory disabled capabilities. So for them, it is important that we include subtitles. So subtitles basically helps you navigate, or helps you basically get to the content where you are not able to basically hear it, or let's say it is in a different language and you are not very well versed with the language. So in that case, subtitles basically helps you get through it in a proper manner. Again, the speed, the pause facilities should be also there. In what speed you are basically listening, you want to make it fast or slow, because from region to region and your familiarity with the language, that could be different for different pace. Okay, so those facilities, those features basically we have to take into consideration when we are talking about the video content. Tabbing the keyboard, this is quite important, because not always a person will be using let's say a mouse. So in that case, we have to make sure that a person, let's take for example, who is using a braille keyboard and he needs to get through each of the items quickly. So in that case, having a tab navigation feature that directly points to the items when I'm shifting between one to other is practically good practice to have it there. So because many times these people basically will be using a keyboard and a screen reader. So when we have this tabbed facility there in place, that basically helps the person with the visual impairment there to listen to it. Again, these are some general practices from accessibility point of view. When we are testing for the accessibility, at least we should try to include 80% of the users from the PWD category, because otherwise, like let's take for example, you include a set of people in, let's say, group A, with people without any disability, and let's say you include a group of people with 80% disabled people. The result is going to change for sure there. I mean, that is what we have noticed in our accessibility testing results and report. Okay, so we have to, because when you are designing for all, we have to make sure that it is tested by users across all category. So certainly we have to take their feedback. We have to know what are their pain points, how we can address it. So those are the things basically we have to take into consideration for accessibility testing here, because it can reveal a very huge gap. In some cases, we have seen that the person in the mobile, when it is designed, they have disabled the zoom in zoom out feature. So this could be a very pain point for the people with low and poor vision. So in that case, we have to make sure that the zoom in zoom out facility, if it is there, we should be basically enable it for all the mobile screen sizes. And we have to certainly check the mobile accessibility separately, because mobile, when it comes into picture, you have different orientation, then different screen size, and accordingly the font and look, the contrast, that might basically change. So when it comes to testing, we have to check for sure in a separate devices in a separate manner. So these are all basically some of the good practices we can think of when it comes to including accessibility principles for web designs. Now there can be a good confusion. I'm often referring to it as accessibility, and there is usability concerns as well. One common question that I like often get is, how is accessibility different from usability? So accessibility basically in short or in general means it is designing for all, regardless of all the technological or physical means. The requirements in this case are technical and related to underlying code, that is to support all the users in our coding practices. So again, this ranges from the people from screen reader to mobile phones and PDO, the PDS or slow modems. or it could be anything in that case. I mean, we have to make sure that it is usable for all the users. While on the other side, when we take into consideration for usability, this is but a measure of how easy a system is to use, and this can be an interaction between people and tool. So the key consideration when it comes to the usability side of things, we basically talk about the ease of learning, how steep the product or whatever the website we are testing, what is the learning curve involved there, or we talk about in terms of efficiency of use, how quickly a person can perform do a task there, or finding a certain piece of information, what is the use of use in the case of navigation. So all these things basically is covered on the usability side. It can be use of memorization as well and the satisfactory level. So those points are primarily covered on the usability side in contrast to the accessibility piece there. Uh, Questions actually, when these are like the general set of questions that when we are trying to think about accessibility, when we are trying to think about including accessibility in our practices. So how does the accessibility question look like? That is what I'm trying to put here. Some generic set of question: if a user has a form for client blindness or other vision issue, is there sufficient contrast on the design? So these are some questions like, is there a visible focus state that you can, include there? Are the all text used correctly or consistently? So all these questions can be in general, should be considered for accessibility when it is coming for uh, accessibility in terms of web design here. But having said that, accessibility doesn't mean it is only restricted to uh, a web design. Like I said, we have the WN Convention for Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that basically requires you to design. When I'm talking about design for all, that basically requires you to design for the services as well. It can be related to air, bus, or rail, or waterborne transport systems, or it can be for telephone systems. It can be for ATM or ticketing or checking machines. So all this aspect has to be basically covered broadly when it comes to accessibility in picture. So as you can see, like in practice, especially in the United States, the most companies are mostly motivated by lawsuits, not by really empathy. So they really pay a high amount of emphasis on this particular point. That it must be there and undercover. That's it. At a high level, I was just trying to cover the accessibility side of things here. Maybe at this moment, I would like to take it forward to Edward. Maybe for the next couple of minutes, we can take a few questions if you have, and I will try to answer to my best. Edward, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Hiren, for that wonderful presentation. Yes, actually, we do have questions. We'll first look at the Q&A box.
Okay.
Trinath has a question for you. This is: how important is it to give a grammatically correct sentence in alt when you're doing that alt thing?
Well, it is very important, but having said that, as long as it is making sense to the particular user and most of the people are able to connect it, it should be fine. It may not be like 100% grammar correct, because when it comes to grammar, you have the UK and you have the US person, right? So again, it is all contextual there. But always, it is always good to have a practice, where we can include 100% grammatically correct sentence or statement there. I hope that answers the question there.
Great. All right. I hope that answers that question as well. So we'll move on to the next one. We have some in the chat box. Oh, wait, hold up. All right, cool. It does answer the question. All right, so we have some in the chat box. Sansar, he's asking, in live events slash meeting recordings, when you spoke about subtitles, he's asking, how about transcript?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat again the question? Subtitles or how about transcript? Is that the question?
Yeah, how about transcript? So
What exactly is the specific question there? Yeah, certainly, having a transcript does make sense there in that case, for sure. If you have the capability for having the transcript there, please do include that. I believe it is more towards, when you are doing a live streaming there, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. So maybe Sansar can form that question again, but we've noted it. And so, yeah. I hope that answered your question, Sansar.
Sansar, if you can be a little more specific with your question, I would be happy to, answer that probably in details.
So he's basically talking about in live events / meeting recordings, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. I
You
mean,
spoke about subtitles. So he's
if
asking how about transcript?
if at all you have the provision in your tool, whatever you are using, and you have the transcript feature that it is automatically, translating and giving you that particular piece of information in Word or in text, then please, that's a good practice to have it there.
Okay, I think he's elaborated on his question. Can you elaborate on a scenario if this webinar is attended by a differently abled person? What are the accessibility principle we need to cover?
So certainly, this is a good point actually. As you can see, this is, we are doing it in, I have the PPT, and we are also doing it like a, you are able to hear it, right? Whatever I'm speaking. So definitely a person who, let's say, take for example, is visually impaired, in that case, listening to this webinar would make sense to him. And let's say a person with, let's say, for example, who can basically read it but cannot hear, in that case, following the slides, as I have outlisted the, guidelines there, or whatever the practices to be followed, or whatever the stats actually that is been there, that would probably make sense to that person. So I think that should justify the presentation that we are doing here for both the users.
All right, great. Thanks, Rain.
Yeah.
We have a question. There's no name. It just says all panelists. So
Okay.
what are the basic or best tools we need to test the web page?
What are the basic and the best tools we need to test a web page? This is like a very generic question as to answer. But you can always Google it on. There are many tools out there available. I cannot recommend one for sure in that case. That I cannot advocate for a single particular tool. But you have this Google page of speed. Then you have, Google has a lot of bunch of offering there. You can just, if at all you want to do a testing there of how your web page is doing in terms of accessibility, then Google is the place. You can just Google around and you can get some links there to go from there.
Great. Another question, we don't have a name though. What is the minimum percentage of any application or web page to satisfy the ARIA features?
Well, to be very honest, in terms of a minimum percentage, I don't have an exact figure. But as I have shown in my slide, maybe I can quickly take you there. There is no fixed number that I can quote, but I hope my slide is visible. The WAI area guidelines, and it says, if you're maintaining this basic sanity, and I think, which is a standard practice across all the designers, that should cover you all. I mean, to arrive at a number, it'll be very difficult in that case.
All right, great. I hope that answers all your questions. Do we have any more questions? Okay, we have one more.
Okay, what is that?
Oh no, wait. It says, if it is possible, could you please share the PPT in accessible place? I don't know what that means.
I believe that's a request if we can share
Yeah,
in
that's a request.
PPT for all of you.
Yeah,
So
so we will be sharing the recording of this presentation. So we'll see if we can also provide a link to this deck. So yeah, that will.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that
Great.
sounds
Okay,
like.
so Okay, so Sansar has another question.
Please.
If I have my designs ready in Figma or Sketch or another app, is there a way I can check the accessibility without human intervention?
Again, it is subjective, but having to rely on a particular algorithm regardless of the tool, let's say whether you use Figma or Sketch or XD, and be it any other tool, like because accessibility, when it comes to it, it's the more human side of it. So you cannot 100% rely on a particular tool. So definitely a human intervention will require, and it will put you in a better place than having to rely on a particular tool when you want to test it.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Sansar. We have another question, no name. Whom will we focus more on while working on accessibility?
Of course, the answer to that will be the user. That is, as I said on one of my previous slide, if you are able to cover the visually impaired category or the group of people, you are like 80% covered there. And rest of the 20%, you have certain assistive technologies with the help of which actually you can address the 20% of the other users for accessibility issues there.
Great. Sansar has another question. Do we have a tool in the market based on ML or AI which can test the accessibility of designs?
Not that I am aware of at the moment, but if at all anything is there, I'm sure we are going to have a blog post for sure for it. I mean, particularly in person, I have not tested. That's why I cannot comment or advocate for any tool at the moment.
All right, great. Thanks, Hiren. And we've noted the question, so we'll keep that in mind, and we'll definitely find a way to answer that question.
Yes.
Like Hiren mentioned, we'll have a blog coming up, so you can keep a tab on the blogs section, Sansar. I'm sure that question will definitely be answered. We have any other questions?
Sure, Edward. I'm also making a note to check on any the industry standard ML AI tool which can basically help us be there. I think Sensor has rightly give us a direction, I think, for our next blog post in that case.
Definitely. We have another question.
All right.
Sansar, which is the most ethical product in the market?
Oh, that's again a very difficult question to answer. but yeah, I'll try to answer my best here. Take for example, I will go to the internet giant Google only. Okay, now you take for example. So you have this, whenever it comes to Google, you have this in your mobile, right? Android, you have that voice recognition in place, right? Or take for example, Apple is coming up with its own from iOS 12 onwards. It has its own assistive technology. With the help of it, it makes your navigation easy, right? So those kind of features, when we look into these giants like Google or Apple, they are bringing in practice. So if I could probably, because they have all the what do you call people and resources there to keep things making happening, and they're thinking in the right direction. So those are the giants actually I can immediately take name of.
All right. Thanks, Hiren. Trinath seems to have made a suggestion for our next webinar. We can take that into account. He wants, there's a request for a webinar on usability, primary focus on usability and how to do usability testing.
Certainly, I think that would require a good deal of time. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like in this presentation, I tried to cover the 35,000 view feed, overview of how accessibility picture looks like. So in a similar format, maybe we can cover for usability testing as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, we seem to have another suggestion from Sansar. It would be great to have a list of best accessible protocologists for us to learn more. I do not know. Yes, that's another suggestion. We can definitely work on that.
Sure, sure, sure. I'm sure, like, there are people who are specifically working on this domain, as I have said, like, you have this standard set of guidelines across various geography for US, and you can, so there are certainly the advocates for accessibility there. So
Yeah.
certainly having them in sessions like this would make a difference for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, it looks like we do not have any more questions. Do we have any more questions? Anyone needs to know something? We've definitely, Hiren, we've also gotten some good feedback, which we've noted. And we will definitely thank you so much for sharing that feedback as well. And
I hope it has been useful and insightful to all the attendees here. And if at all, any comments, any further feedback, please do drop us a note. I think, Edward, you might be sharing the details of it, right?
yeah, we have another suggestion, which we will definitely note and take into account. But I think if we don't have any more questions now, we can end this session. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this session. We hope it was helpful. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next webinar. Thanks, Hiren. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
session.
Edward. Thank you, all the attendees who has been part of it. It was nice connecting with you all.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Yeah, have a good night.